Well, good evening, fellow Toastmasters. Welcome to our first monthly coaching session. This is a opportunity for me as VP of Education to introduce and go over the many club roles that we have for our meetings and give insight as to how you can better prepare and better execute the roles, as well as give you all the space to ask questions, get insight, and get support on your future projects. I know as VP of Education, there are not many active mentors who can assist in these spaces. So I want to be able to help the masses without leaving anyone out. And so this is my attempt in doing that. For tonight's first official session, I will be going over the role of Toastmaster of the Day. I'll go over the importance of the role, some expectations when it comes to preparation as well as executing it, the benefits of being a Toastmaster of the day, as well as some challenges you may face. And then I will open it up for any questions that you may have regarding the role and any way I can support you in other parts of the club that you may need. Okay? So, in terms of the Toastmaster of the day, it is the MC, the ultimate host and guide for taking our club members and guests through a Toastmaster meeting. They generally set the tone and the energy of the meeting, although it is every member's responsibility to keep a very upbeat and positive spirit throughout the meeting. It is ultimately the Toastmaster of the day's responsibility or role in making sure that we are on track, but also having a great time throughout the evening. The importance of this role is it not only allows us to have a very fluid experience within our club meetings, but it also helps us to stay on track when it comes to time. Time management is definitely one of the benefits in taking on a role as Toastmaster of the Day, as it requires you to be more mindful of the time that we do have throughout the evening, as well as helps you to stay on track and keep time for everyone else that has a role. Some of the expectations that comes with this role is helping the members to sign up in advance. So what that may look like is you sending the agenda out, which I can go through if you'd like, but sending the agenda out ahead of time. Normally, the VP of Education will send out an email to request someone to take on the role of Toastmaster of the Day. But once that role is fulfilled, it is the Toastmaster of the Day's priority or responsibility to ensure that the agenda is completed in advance. And that includes working with the VP of Education to get this done. Another expectation is that you will be required to, like I said, keep track of time as well as make the transitions fluid throughout the evening. And I will go over that when it comes to actually taking on the role. But I do want to go over some of the benefits of being Toastmaster of the Day. So, in properly preparing for this role, it allows us to develop in our leadership because we do have to be active in reaching out to our members. Like I said, being organized in setting up the agenda and working with other members in order to get that completed. It also allows you to get a lot of public speaking practice in the sense that the Toastmaster of the Day is the person who is speaking the most throughout the evening. It also, with speaking a lot, you're given the opportunity to speak off of the cuff, which personally I enjoy. I think for many people it could be a bit intimidating, but what I've experienced is that it allows you to get out of your head and to be more present and mindful within hosting the meeting. So one of the things that I love is as you are listening to the speakers or as you are listening to the general evaluator or even the table topics, it allows you to be very present because when transitioning, you're able to pick up on some of the things that were said or the nuances of the speaker that you can then use for transitioning. So on top of the public speaking practice, speaking off of the cuff and developing your leadership, you're also creating that mindfulness and that presentness and just being an active listener. And then, like I said before, it makes you more organized because not only do you have to prepare in advance by completing the agenda, but you have to also know where is each person on the agenda, what are the transitions and who is doing what role. It keeps you on top of your feet, especially when we have last minute adjustments or you have someone that's added to the agenda before the meeting. So just being organized with your notes, with the agenda, with any changes, these are all benefits. In terms of actually taking on the Toastmaster of the Day role, I'm going to share the updated Toastmaster of the Day script that I went ahead and added a few changes because before we were missing a couple of roles, if I'm not mistaken. I think I have it here. So under members only, you have to be logged in, of course, but you'll go to member downloads and under the miscellaneous tab, you will find the updated Toastmaster of the Day script. I won't download it again just because I have it, but I will share my screen with the updated role. Just a second, and we can go through that a bit here. So after the president is done their introduction and welcoming of the guests, they will pass the control over to the Toastmaster of the day. And after that, you are pretty much the sole responsibility of getting us through the entire meeting. So, of course, thanking the president as well as addressing and welcoming the guests to the meeting. I will, like I said, you have access to this, so I won't say everything verbatim, but essentially, you do want to make sure that you utilize this tool, that you practice in advance because it'll help you to get a feel for the flow of the meeting. And there are some key aspects that you want to make sure that you include. So that's why you have a resource such as this script. Some of the things to take note of is always checking in the beginning of the meeting if there are any agenda adjustments, just because when you are preparing for this role, you may have an old agenda with people who are signed up for some roles that then change last minute. So in the beginning, after you have introduced yourself and welcome the guests, you want to ask if there's any agenda adjustments. And this can be supported by the VP of Education or the president or whomever who knows that changes have been made. And if not, you can always move forward. After that, we then want to introduce the three parts of the meeting, which are prepared speeches. That is when a member has prepared a speech in advance based on their pathway requirements. They do have an evaluator who will go over that later on. The table topics portion, which is a part of the meeting that we get to practice our impromptu speaking, and the table topics master will lead the effort. And then the third part, which is always considered the most important part, is the evaluations, and that is led by the general evaluator. Something I just want to point out, which is extremely important in this role, is that you as the Toastmaster of the day, your role, though it seems like it's a heavy lift, it's very simple because you're just passing the baton to the next person throughout the meeting. And so when it comes to transitioning into the next part or giving control to the next person, be mindful that you are not responsible necessarily for introducing the entire role. Okay, so every person who has a role can introduce their own role. So For example, after introducing the three parts of the meeting, you will call on the grammarian to give the word of the day. We, as the Toastmaster of the day, we do not have to, though you may be comfortable doing it. I just think it's a bit redundant if we, maybe redundancy is something that works for us and helps us to remember a little bit more or to process it, but essentially allowing the person who's taking on the role to introduce themselves and the importance of the role, I think gives them a little bit more responsibility, so it takes less, or sorry, takes more off your plate as Toastmaster of the day. So when calling on the grammarian can go over the parts of the grammarian role. Your role as Toastmaster of the day is solely to go over your role and to introduce each person who's going to facilitate the other roles. I hope that makes sense. I then also added that we have the invocation, which is generally delivered as a positive thought. And I put a space in there so that you can say who it's given by, and to mention that it is a unique aspect to universally speaking, as members do not receive pathway credits for this role, but it is a way for us to set the tone of the meeting. So what people will see in other clubs is they have other specialty roles that kind of help to make the meeting unique to their clubs. And that's what is the positive thought for us. So after you've gone over the introduction, you'll then jump into prepared speeches. What I love about this script is that you do not have to do it verbatim, but it does give you insight as Toastmaster of the day of how you can prepare. So when you go into the prepared speeches, of course, introducing this first speaker, but what I like to do is kind of make it unique to how I'm feeling in the moment. So you can say something as simple as, our first speaker today is Tim Fahey. He will be giving a speech from his pathway Dynamic Leadership. It is a level 2 speech, and the project is effective coaching. The title of his speech is blank, and then this will be given in 5 to 7 minutes. That is a very generic way. As you get more comfortable in the role and you get a lot of practice, or you prepare, which preparation prevents poor performance. So looking at this script ahead of time, filling in the blanks, looking at the agenda, putting in what the projects are, all of that will help you to better prepare for the role, but it'll also help you to feel more confident when you're delivering it. So essentially, I could say our first speaker of the night is giving a speech from the Dynamic Leadership Pathway. It is a level 2 speech, understanding your leadership style. And the speech title is blank. Please welcome Timothy Fahey, and then saying the speech title again. So that all comes with practice and just comfortability. Like I said, this can change anytime. You can adjust it how you want to. And that's why I love this role, is it doesn't have to be verbatim. You don't have to read the script verbatim, as long as you say that there's three parts of the speech, or sorry, three parts of the meeting: prepared speeches, where a member gives their speech based on their allotted pathway or selected pathway. Table topics is where we get to practice speaking off the cuff versus practice our impromptu speaking. So the more that you practice with this role, the more you'll kind of find your flow and figure out what you want to say and when you say it. And then the evaluations portion is the part where we get the most bang for our buck. Like, that's why I really love this role, because it allows you to not only get comfortable leading a meeting, but it allows you to kind of find your speaking style ultimately, because there are so many aspects to it that you can customize to fit what you want, as long as you are getting the point across, which is, these are the three parts of the meeting, these are the prepared speakers, this is the table topics master, this is the evaluations. So as long as you're hitting those points, it doesn't necessarily matter what you say in between. And that's again why I love this role so much. In terms of preparing, and I'm just going to kind of go back around for just a moment, the most that you have to prepare is helping to complete the agenda and knowing who's in what role. Outside of that, everything else kind of is go as you will or go as you want to. So after introducing the prepared speakers, you go into the table topics portion. And again, this is what I love about this role, is you're just introducing. once you're done introducing, you get to take a back seat. And then once you're called back up, you get to then introduce the next person. It's constantly just passing the mic off to the next person, kind of like an award show when you think about it. I think that's the best way to look at it, right? Is this person is doing this thing, or this person is receiving this reward, and letting them take control of the meeting. You're kind of just there to keep the upbeat tempo and keep us on time, essentially, and organized. So that being said, in terms of going through the parts of the meeting, the biggest part I think that helps to, how do I say, improve or edify the flow of the meeting is transitioning. So instead of just saying, okay, now we're going into prepared speeches, now we're going into table topics, it's how can you incorporate something such as the theme of the meeting into your transition? Or how can you incorporate what the speaker just said into the meeting? So for example, if you're transitioning from speaker to speaker, you can, after the first speaker is done, say something along the lines of, um, thank you, Tim. That was an amazing speech. I love how you talked about the challenges that you've had in being a leader, and I completely resonated with your style, as that's how I show up in my own professional field. So just taking away something from each speaker to be able to have that transition, or maybe there was a quote they said that could help kind of, like I said, make it a more fluid transition. That way it's not like first, next, then finally. Like those are great transitions, but those are basic transitions. So when you're able to actually pull from the speakers itself, one, it shows that you're listening actively and that you are engaged in the meeting, but it also increases your performance as an effective communicator. So those are some things to just keep in mind. And like I said, essentially, you're just passing the baton from one person to the next. So in terms of like adding the theme, for example, that one is, I won't say difficult. I think in terms of like, let's say in beginning of introducing yourself as Toastmaster of the day, before you jump into, let's say, introducing the parts of the meeting, you can talk about the theme a bit. And then as you go through, maybe throwing in some special facts or quotes, which I have loved watching in the past. So like in between prepared speeches to the table topics, you can share, hey, did you know that currently our next meeting theme is back to school? So currently in the Montgomery County Public Schools, they were voted one of the top 5 in the entire United States as far as education goes. So like something like that to kind of, like I said, tie in the theme, but also add a level of oomph to the meeting, because as we're going through the meeting, if we're being honest, it can become a bit generic in terms of going from bit to bit to bit, versus like, how can I add something that kind of takes us off of our structure, but still keeps everyone engaged? And so those are some things to just keep in mind. It's kind of, again, like an award show where someone will add a funny joke in between transition, or will do a wacky performance. It's how do you keep your group, your audience engaged while you still have an agenda to complete. And that comes from you understanding yourself as a speaker, your speaking style, your level of confidence, all of those good things. So I just want to pause here for just a moment. I've been speaking a lot. I'm so sorry. Is there anything that you want to ask before I move on to some last minute items that I have?
No, but I think that your anecdotal responses about the variations are really part of the education that we wouldn't ordinarily get just by reading the script. So that is very helpful. I'm hoping maybe what we can do is, write a little blog or whatever about this to be able to kind of create a little bit more body of that. I know we have the video, which is going to be helpful.
Mhm.
So anyway, so that's what I'm making a lot of notes because I can use this even in my other business meetings to organize it. Um,
Absolutely. And that's something that I didn't add in the benefits, but what this role has done for me in terms of, for example, at my job, I'm an executive coordinator, but I help to facilitate a lot of the events that we're doing. And so there I will introduce the event, I will close the event, and I will also pass control over to other facilitators throughout the evening. And that has helped me to speak off the cuff, even though I'll feel the nervousness, because I know what the expectations are, and that's where preparation is so key in a role like this. It kind of just translates into my professional field very seamlessly because I can introduce what the purpose of us being here is, engage with the crowd in a way that I normally wouldn't because I never had this skill set before, but then also be able to stay on track of time when it comes to an agenda or a schedule. So this can help tremendously for someone who is leading a meeting at work or who is doing a presentation or who is, like, for example, running a baby shower. I helped coordinate my cousin's baby shower, and I was able to go from welcoming people, letting them know where things were, to facilitating all of the games that we were playing. Like, this role is so crucial, and I think on the surface, it's very intimidating because there is a lot of speaking that comes with it and not as much preparation. But what I think people fail to realize is because there's not heavy lifting in terms of memorizing anything, that you're able to be more fluid. You're able to not feel so restricted. Because I feel like with a prepared speech, for example, you're constantly in the back of your head, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget, that you get so nervous and you feel a bit overwhelmed in delivering your speech, especially if you're not fully prepared or you didn't practice as much. Versus something like this, where it's just like, okay, as long as I know the three parts of the meeting and I have the agenda, I can speak to who's doing what. Everything else kind of just falls in place. And so I have fallen in love with this role, and I wish everyone would be more comfortable taking on it, because once you do it, you realize it's really not that hard. I think it looks harder on paper, and then of course the behind the scenes, sending out the emails, but outside of that, it's really not that difficult. And I guess that's because I've done it so much, but I think the more you do it, the easier it becomes, like anything else. So, that being said, the other couple of tidbits I would like to share is just knowing your agenda is so important. Who is doing what role? Not just because of just the importance of being prepared, but how seamless it is. Like, imagine, again, I don't know why this keeps coming up, but an award show. Imagine watching an award show and Tim is the host, and the next person who's supposed to come up, Tim forgets who that person is. The transition on camera when you're watching that would feel very muddy, and it would almost distract the audience a bit. Not to say that we're striving for perfection, but we are striving to be better communicators. And in being better communicators, we have to be our best prepared self. And that includes looking at the agenda, especially if you are responsible as Toastmaster of the day to help complete it. You should know when you go on there, okay, this is who my speakers are. This is who my grammarian is. This is who my positive thought is. This is who my table topics master is. And that's why we have the printed agendas and the digital ones so that we can stay on top of it, especially when those changes come. But it is so crucial in just having that seamless transition during a meeting. And so I think that's a way to practice. If it, how do I say, in preparing for your speech, you're practicing, right, your intro, your body, your closing, and kind of taking us through your speech. The same goes for preparing for a role like this. How can you use the script to put the information from the agenda on the script, or make your own script for that matter? Copy and paste and add whatever you need to help you feel more secure in taking on the role. That's why we're here, right? To learn these competencies. And if we come in with just the script and no idea of who's on the agenda, that's when we'll feel the most frustrated or most confused when we're going through it, not knowing what part is next, not knowing who's in what role. And if I'm being transparent, I had a moment last weekend where I was getting ready for something and I had like this moment of anxiety and frustration. And I said, why am I so frustrated right now? And I said, because I'm not prepared. And I think when we're going through a role like this, or any role for that matter, if we don't take a moment to prepare ourselves enough to where we can feel confident going into the room and taking on the role or executing it rather, we are going to feel that anxiety and we are going to feel flustered when we get up in front of people, already amplifying the anxiety that's already present or the nervousness and fear that's already present. So when you are prepared, you're a lot less likely to stumble as much when that fear does show up, because you know in your mind, okay, I know what I need to do and that's all I need to focus on, regardless of how many people are looking at me, regardless if I stumble on a word. You know what you're supposed to do. And so preparation is huge. Reaching out to your peers is imperative. Coming to a session like this so that you can ask questions and you can get the preparation or practice you need is important. And that's why I want to do these sessions so that people can get that insight and can feel more comfortable. The last thank you. The last thing, couple things I would like to just touch base on is arriving early. That also kind of goes hand in hand with um proper preparation. Is just arriving early so that you can go over anything, ask any questions you may have, confirm, like, let's say if there's a name of a speaker you don't know, you want to make sure that you touch base with that speaker or whoever is coordinating the meeting. And this goes in your professional field as well. Just having that dialogue with the people in the room. What do I need? What do they need? How can I best execute this role? And so arriving early is huge, especially if there are any agenda changes. You want to know that in advance, instead of right when the meeting started and you're kind of like pushed into the role. And then lastly, I just want to go over a couple of minor challenges, which is last minute cancellations. What do you do when a speaker says they can't come and it's 30 minutes before a meeting? What do you do when someone changes a role last minute and you weren't informed? Those are things that you could face, but when you're prepared, those little challenges that come up won't make you stumble as much, because you can easily kind of pivot or ask the people around you to support you. And so in the instance that someone does show up last minute, your biggest support, or I guess point of contact, would be VP of education first, president after, and just anyone else who you know. Like if you know the agenda, for example, and you see someone is not signed up for a role, or you see someone is signed up for a small role, small with emphasis, because I'm sorry, with air quotes, because nothing really here is small. It's all about how you take it on yourself. But like positive thought or timer, counter grammarian, something like that, that doesn't require much preparation or much attention, rather, that you ask them to help double a role if they can. Just looking at, if you know the agenda, you can see how people can assist you. And then also technical difficulties. So again, that may be either in person as a hybrid meeting, always making sure that you have a person who can support the technical difficulties, whether that be the sergeant at arms or uh the faculty personnel. And then on Zoom, what do we do when there is a technical difficulty? So one of the things that we kind of look at is pivoting again. How can you keep the group engaged while someone like your VP of education or your president or somebody from the group who can help try to figure out, okay, someone just dropped off. Let's say a speaker was in the middle of their speech and they dropped off, making sure that the timer stops the time at that time, and then having someone else help support you in reconnecting that person while you keep the meeting going. That may mean, okay, for the next minute or so while we figure this out, we just have a quick, brief conversation about the theme of tonight, just engaging with the guest again. So there are many ways to kind of navigate that. And then from there, the last challenge is time management. We kind of talked about this briefly before we started recording. Sometimes we will have people who speak a little bit over their time and can get a bit wordy. So just having some cues, and then also, like I said, if you have the agenda, you know where we're supposed to be in relation to the schedule. So that may mean from 7:30 to 7:40 we have table topics responses. But we, because of the overlap from roles before, we get to table topics at about 7:35. We may only get to have 2 responders. And so something like that, you would have to interject. Let's say if you see the table topics master wanting to do another question, instead of connecting with you saying, "Hey, do we have more time?" As Toastmaster of the day, they may just be in a flow and want to keep getting people to respond. It's up to you to interject and say, "Hey, this is great conversation. However, we are a bit over time, so we're going to wrap this portion of the meeting up." And you can do it in a very respectful, tasteful, and uninterrupting way. So those are some of the challenges that you may face. But overall, I love this role. I'm very passionate about it. And I think the more people take on this role, they would see how much it benefits their personal lives, their professional lives, and just increases confidence. If I'm being honest, I don't think it's my speeches that helped me to be able to speak the way that I do today. I think it's having a role like Toastmaster of the Day or even general evaluator where I'm just speaking to speak because I'm not so in my head anymore. I'm just not, I won't say word vomit. There's a lot of intention with what I'm saying, but essentially because I'm getting constant practice of just speaking without thinking so much, I get out of my head a lot more. And so I think this is a role for someone who struggles with impromptu speaking, who struggles with just answering a question in front of people, engaging in small talk because you're not thinking so much anymore. You're just trying to get your point across. And I think that's what this role does for me, at least. And so I am open to running this specific role again in the future, just because I feel like it is one that constantly needs a bit of work with members, just feeling confident and comfortable and knowing what is expected and knowing what it takes to actually prepare for it. Because I think it's easy to have a script and think, oh, I don't have to do anything to prepare. But I promise you, once you actually take a few moments, a few days even to prepare for a role like this, you'll come in with ease taking on this role. So that's all I have. Like I said, I have the agenda, or sorry, not the agenda, the script in the member downloads on the website. So please do utilize it, ask questions. I think it has everything on there. Tim did mention that it would be nice to have a bit of dialogue or transition in between. But if I'm being completely honest, that is the, how do I say, that is the benefit of you preparing as the member, is you making notes for yourself as you are practicing for the role. Like, what would I want to put here if it was a quote or if it was, like you said, an anecdote? What can I do in between these things to transition? But like I said, when you're doing it, you kind of just do it without thinking too much about it. And so, what I've seen, Tim, in the past is you do a really good job of that because you are very active in your listening and you are very engaged, that you don't have a problem with the transition as much. I think it kind of gets a little bit, how do I say, a little bit challenged when we do get a bit wordy, I guess is the word, or we're not concise with our transitions. And that's like the only struggle I see for the most part. But then again, like I said, preparing is the biggest thing I see across the board, is not enough people prepare for this because they have the script and they feel like they can lean on it with comfort. But if you don't know what's in those spaces, then you kind of are preparing yourself for failure when you think about it, because you have this blank script but nothing in it to help you know, okay, this is a trigger point. I need to be sure that I mention this at this point. And that's what the script is for you to kind of just have a reminder of what's next, not necessarily read it verbatim. So getting comfortable with that. And then I would even add to when you're listening to other Toastmasters of the day, if you see something or hear something that you like that they've done, take note of that. So when you take on the role, you can start implementing it yourself. And that goes with anything that you study or anything that you do is practicing and watching other people do it so that you can kind of tweak yourself what you like and don't like. All right.